And then I think before I start sharing my screen, I will do some introductions. I have with me today, also from NEAR, is Kate Hodges. Kate, do you want to say hi? Kate's working with us on the Ready, Set, Go project, the project that, that allows us the time and opportunity to work with all of you, is funded through the Marr and Taub Foundations. We work in collaboration with the Department of Education to provide needed supports, and work closely with our partners at ACNJ, Advocates for Children of New Jersey. And we have Cynthia Rice here with us today, and you'll hear from Cynthia before we're done. So in addition to having Kate working on the projects, we brought in two of our favorite consultants. We have with us Amanda Colon and Alexis Ziegler, who both very experienced in the preschool world. They are helping us to work closely with school districts and handle some application reviews and feedback. So we're really happy to have them both here with us. They're going to help me with the presentation. I will go ahead and get the presentation started. And let's start from the very beginning. Come on. There we go. So today's agenda, as we've already done introductions, I will go through, we're going to go through the PEA application, the Preschool Education Aid application, which is also called the operational plan on your Word document that you're working with as you work on the application. We're going to go through it similar in the way to that the Department of Education did on your mandatory TA meeting. But what we're hoping to do today is take a deeper dive into each of those sections, offer you some tips for completing the application, and allow you some time to sort of ask your questions of us to see if we can help you draft the best application possible. So we'll go through each of the different sections. We're going to look at outreach, enrollment, and community, curriculum, assessment and program evaluation, professional development, the roles of the coaches, the master teacher, and the preschool intervention staff. We're going to talk about inclusion and a little bit about the budget workbook, although there was a budget workbook webinar I know a lot of your districts attended yesterday. We will have open Q&A at the end for any questions that have not gotten addressed along the way. What we'll do today is I'm going to ask you to put your questions in the chat box, and Kate is handling, she's keeping her eye on that, and she will we'll sort of stop after each section to answer questions as we go along, or any questions that that may come up at the end we'll address. If you have a district-specific question that may also be relevant for other districts, we encourage you to go ahead and ask it today, and so that we can address it, since it will likely apply to some other people. If it's a very district nitty-gritty question, we're going to ask you to email me, and we will get back to you, have somebody work with you to help iron out what your very specific question is. If it's something that's going to require a little more time, we have just an hour together, and so we're going to move along. And Kate, you can interrupt me anytime you see any questions come in. So just to go briefly, we're going to sort of blow through this section. I want to remind you what the required elements are, the proposal cover page, the operational plan overview, which is detailed in your plan. It's no more than 3 pages. Each of 7 program components you're going to write about, they can be no more than 2 pages each. And one of the things I put on this, which is this bullet here, one of the things that DOE added into the plan this year is that each of those 7 areas should include goals, objectives, strategies, and evaluation for each. So if you look at the notice of funding opportunity, which is the first PDF document that you would have gotten from the department a few weeks ago that announced the funding, and you look at that document, you will see that this language of including goals, objectives, strategies, and evaluations is embedded within each section. But the actual application, the operational plan, the Word document that you're drafting into does not include that language with every section. So we're going to encourage everybody to sort of be sure that you're cross-referencing both the notice of funding opportunity, the NFO that came out as a PDF, with the operational plan. And if there are any bullets that are in one and not the other, just be sure you've addressed all of them. And each component section should include goals, objectives, and strategies. We'll talk about the budget workbook is another component. And as I said, we went into that a detail with that yesterday. We will send out a recording from the budget workbook webinar we held yesterday in case anybody missed it. You'll be required to send the statement of insurances with signatures. You will submit a certified board resolution, and this is your board signing off on your application. If the board's not meeting before the due date of the application, you can put your anticipated due date submit that to the department instead, and then forward the budget resolution when it's available. And if you contract with any private providers or Head Start programs, and we hope you do, you should submit a letter of intent for each partner that you've developed, and it should be signed by both parties agreeing to the plan for opening classrooms together in February. Some important dates to keep in mind, of course, the application due date, conveniently the Monday after Thanksgiving weekend, is due on Monday, November 30th by 4 p.m. DOE has announced that they will notice awards on December 18th, which would mean you would get a notification of whether or not you're receiving the funding by December 18th, and that you would be expected to have classes open, whatever version of open they are in this new world, on February 1st, 2021, or if you can get them open before 2021, February 1st, you are invited to do that, and you should let DOE know that you're in a position to be able to do that. Stop. Anything's coming up, just go ahead and stop me. I wanted to just point out the scoring rubric. So the notice of funding opportunity includes the points awarded to each of the sections that you're going to be writing to. The same points are not embedded in the operational plan or the application that you're using. So I just wanted to draw your attention to the fact that each section is worth a particular number of points, and some are worth more than others. So you'll see that DOE puts a heavier weight on the curriculum and child assessment section at 25, awarding it 25 points. So you want to do everything you can to address every point that they're asking you to address, so that points aren't taken away for things that are missing. The inclusion section is worth 15 points, and the budget narrative section and the budget are worth 20 points. And these are things just to keep in mind, since you may not have looked back at the notice of funding opportunity since it first came out. The operational plan overview is not actually worth any points, but it is a really important section for you. This can be no more than 3 pages. And this is a time where you're going to give a high-level overview of your preschool plan as it stands now and as it's intended to be once you receive the preschool funding. So you should let them know who are your families and what are the demographics of your community. How do you know that your families need this program? What's the importance of the preschool program to your families? And what will the benefits be for them? Describe how you've assessed the needs of the community. Have you done outreach to know that your families are interested in your full-day preschool program? And what other resources and supports do you already offer to families, and are you intending to offer to families? If you have a relationship with a community agency, maybe that provides books to your children, or back to school backpacks, you have a backpack drive, or a local organization that provides ESL classes for your families that need it, or any other relationships that you have in the community, this is a good time, a good place for you to write that in. You'll also note the qualifications of the person who will be operating the program, who will be overseeing the program, and what are their existing responsibilities. So understanding that if you have a person that may already have another job is taking on the preschool program, especially if it's a smaller program for now, explain what their other responsibilities are, who that person is that will oversee the program, and a little bit about what their qualifications to do so are. There is time to elaborate on that again in another section. You'll also describe opportunities for collaborations among support staff. They specifically mention collaborations between your master teacher and your preschool intervention and referral team. How do they collaborate with each other? How do both of those coaching positions collaborate with the Office of Special Education in your district? And that will all be sort of covered in the overview section. I know I'm talking really fast, Johnny. Let me know if there are any questions. And at this point, actually, I will pass it over to Amanda Colon, who will talk to you about outreach and community.
Hi. So first you want to make sure that you include in your application your plan on how you will recruit and enroll children to start by February 1st, including specifically how you will recruit high needs, low income, and your most vulnerable families. I will say if you are partnering with a Head Start program, they are already working very closely with these most vulnerable families. So it's probably a good idea to reach out to them and ask them what their recruitment strategies are so that you can include those in your document. You do get priority points for mixed delivery. So that's if you're contracting with a Head Start program or a local private provider. I always want to make the pitch for this because the kids in your district are going to attend those places anyway. And if you partner with them, that money helps create an even better program to prepare them for kindergarten because they'll have higher qualified teachers. They'll have the support of your master teacher and your PIRT team. They'll have just a better experience overall. So it benefits both that program and you to work together. You want to include your 5-year plan to meet your full universe of 3- and 4-year-olds, or at least 90% of that universe. So think about whether or not you have the space in district to do that, or whether or not the part you're planning to use have additional space that you could use for that. And make sure that your plan is based on community needs. I think Beth talked 2 slides ago about what you're already doing with the community. Think about how you'll use that information to figure out specific needs. There was a question earlier on the last webinar about whether or not it's permissible to prioritize low-income families in your enrollment, and the answer is yes. And I think Kate has the exact information where you can find that Q&A from the DOE.
Yep, I will post that. And we also have another question for you. If districts apply for the grant, is it possible to have all classrooms at a Head Start and none on the public school campus?
The answer for that is yes, absolutely. So you can have a mix of in-district classrooms, Head Start provider classrooms, and private provider classrooms, but you could also have all of your classrooms in any one of those 3 spaces. So yes, that's absolutely possible. And you can start with classrooms in one place by February and then add additional locations in your 5-year plan as well.
And I would also add to that those don't need to be new classes. So especially this year, probably more than ever, many children are already seated in childcare centers and Head Start programs because parents are trying to accommodate their schedules and have children, since most children are in public school buildings part-time at best right now. So if a local provider or Head Start program has district children already being served, you can contract with them for those children that are already in the school, in the childcare center or the Head Start program.
And one last possibility for any rare district that has extra space in district, I even have a collaboration with my program with the South Amboy Public Schools where our classrooms are actually in the public elementary school building, but operated by Head Start. So something like that is also a possibility. You want to make sure that the community collaboration and planning section is fleshed out pretty well. This is where you're going to talk about your early childhood advisory council. What I've noticed in most applications when I first go through them is that this advisory council is usually heavily dependent upon district staff, but you want to make sure that your ECAC also involves parents and a lot of community members and community support. So those community partners that you're already working with or that the Head Start program is working with should be part of your advisory council. Places like PIC and SNAP, your medical and healthcare professionals, people who can support your families in getting things that they need in and outside of the school. So make sure you talk about what your plans are going to look like for your ECAC, what activities you're going to do, how often you're going to meet, what those community collaborations will bring to your families and how they will support your families. One that we found that lower income families, especially undocumented families, have a hard time with is dentists. So you might really want to consider reaching out to your dentists in your community. You're going to want to talk about here your community parent involvement specialist. In most districts, this is a social worker who has shared responsibilities. Part of their role is with the pre-K program, but usually, unless you're in a really large district, this is usually not a person who only works with preschool. You could also contract, if you're contracting with Head Start already, Head Start often has people who can do this on staff. So if you're a smaller district and you just want to contract for a certain amount of time, that's one place you could look, or you could share with nearby districts. And the last thing you want to work on here is your transition from pre-K through third grade. I want to point out what Beth said earlier is that your transition team that works on the transitions from pre-K to third grade should not be the same team as your early childhood advisory council. These are two different teams that do two different things. Beth, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
I would just say that typically the transition team, although a community person may be involved in that, that will typically be district staff at all grade levels and across administrative positions to work on transitions and alignment from pre-K to 3. Although, as I said, it's good to have community input. It wouldn't necessarily be comprised of the same individuals that you're pulling from the community for the Early Childhood Advisory Council. And I think before we move along to curriculum, I want to stop and check with my partner at ACNJ and see, Cynthia Rice, do you have anything to add about either the outreach
Sure.
and partnering with
Sure, just two very quick things. Thanks, Beth. You know, this whole expansion asks districts to think a little differently through a different lens. And, you know, there are not many examples short of, you know, after school programs where districts are looking to outside agencies. In our AVID districts and those districts that have been providing preschool for more than 20 years, the majority of the 3 and 4-year-olds are in in private provider and Head Start programs. And your goal when you're thinking about both your plan for next year and in the future is how do we get the maximum number of 3 and 4-year-olds in the program? That's the way you should be thinking. And the reality is that most schools, the buildings themselves can't house all the 3 and 4-year-olds. So thinking differently on how to make sure that children have access to this incredibly high quality program. The other thing I just want to mention, also think outside the box for when you're talking about your councils. We've heard people use, you know, for example, I'm on one advisory council where they brought in the largest business, which was Home Depot. And Home Depot began to be involved with support with outside programs for children, for very young children. They paid for it. They became engaged in this process. Make sure that you have somebody from the library on, you know, making sure that they're working in coordination with the preschool program. So think a little bit differently as you move forward. That's it. Amanda did a great job.
Thank you. We always appreciate your feedback, though. Feet on the ground. Next section is curriculum development. As I mentioned earlier, this is worth 25 points. Essentially, what DOE wants to know here is what is the status of your curriculum implementation? Has the district already been implementing one of the research-based approved curriculum? And how long have they been doing so? You talk about what edition you're using and how much professional development has been completed. The department has 4 approved curriculum models, which have actually just changed. The models are creative curriculum, high scope, tools of the mind, and a new one this year is Connect for Learning. So that's brand new to the list. They have had Curiosity Corner on the list for many years, and they are phasing out the use of Curiosity Corner. So if anyone is using Curiosity Corner and you'd like to check in with us about how to go about transitioning to another curriculum, DOE is really interested to know what is your plan. If you're Staff has already been trained by the developer. Let them know you've had training from the developer. If you need to bring the developer in to do full staff training because you haven't quite started using the most recent edition of creative curriculum, for example, tell them that. You can flesh out the professional development plans in the next section. You're also required to use a performance-based child assessment system if you're not already. And the most commonly used performance-based child assessments are the Teaching Strategies Gold, or if you're using high scope curriculum, high scope core advantage. Some people use work sampling. There are various systems that people use, and DOE is, you have a choice in that if you're not using one now. DOE does not strongly discourages the use of any other standard child assessment. So any, paper and pencil testing that you might be inclined to do with any of your preschoolers, DOE will strongly urge you not to do that. And you certainly wouldn't want to write about it here. DOE also does not support the use of supplemental curriculum. So any supplemental curriculum that you may be using, I will say, DOE supports the use of the pyramid model, but there's no other curriculum, no curriculum, not that that is, but approved to use. So if you're using something like handwriting without tears, DOE would discourage you from doing so, and I would discourage you from mentioning it in this part of the application. And we can talk to you more about that another time if you'd like to reach out. This is another place where DOE asks about transition planning. And I would say, since this is curriculum development and implementation, that this is the section where you really flesh out how the district is working to align the curricula across grade levels from pre-K to grade 3. DOE has been making a push in recent years to be sure that all age level, all of the early grades are developmentally appropriate for children. And so that we want to be looking at not sort of getting the children ready for kindergarten as much as making sure that kindergarten accommodates the children that come to them at the end of preschool. And for those of you that are not already running any full day program, I think one of the things you'll find as a benefit is that your kindergarten teachers will be amazed at the difference in growth from your, with having your preschoolers in a full day program. DOE wants here for you to mention any innovations that make your program unique. Describe in detail supports you have for ELLs, assuming if that is part of your population. If you have a high ELL population, you can talk about that here and mention what kind of supports are you giving, using home language surveys for all the families. Do you have materials available to the children and the families in their home language? Are there administrative supports in place for English language learners? It is not permissible to use preschool money to hire an ELL coach, but if your district has an ELL coach, it would be appropriate for that coach to work with your preschool classroom to help implement, planned activities to help scaffold the learning of ELLs. So anyway, just write about that as it's appropriate and relevant for your community. You need to ensure that teachers have appropriate qualifications across district and private provider locations, and that is P3 certified. They can at a minimum have a certificate of eligibility or a certificate with advanced standing, but it should be in preschool to grade 3. Teachers, we will talk about inclusive settings, and Alexis is going to talk to you more about inclusion, but in a general education classroom with children, preschoolers with disabilities are included. You are not required to have teachers dual certification, and any of your gen ed teachers in P3 certified should be qualified to do that. And you should note here that all classes will be capped at 15 children, and that's inclusive of your children with disabilities. Kate, have any questions come in so far?
They have not.
All right, moving along. For professional development, DOE wants to know that you have a systematic and comprehensive plan. So if you should be including professional development for all of your pre-K staff, including support staff. So I will tell you that if you have therapists coming in to provide supports for children, whoever is working with your children, should have training in the curriculum model. You should be sure that your administrators, obviously your master teachers and preschool intervention and referral specialists should all be trained in the curriculum. Have teachers been trained, or what's your plan for training teachers in providing supports for ELL and inclusion and integrating therapies into the program, and getting trained in the curriculum and assessment. If you have a large number of staff that need training, it would make sense for you to set aside funding to have the developer do the training for the full staff. If most of the staff have been trained in the curriculum already and you're hiring a couple of new people, you can get training through Grow NJ Kids, the state's quality rating and improvement system, and we'll talk a little more about that. But that training is available free of charge once you've enrolled in Grow NJ Kids, so that's an option and a resource for you. I will tell you that DOE recommends against having preschoolers in with special area teachers. They don't recommend children be brought out for specials. But I'm going to say that if you have any special area teachers that are involved with the preschoolers, they should also be trained in the curriculum. You need to also address training for the master teacher and the preschool intervention or referral team. They may be turnkeying information. They may be running PLCs for teachers, but likewise, your master teacher would need training in the master teacher seminar that's provided by the Department of Ed, and the preschool intervention and referral specialists would need training in the PIRS seminar, the PIRT seminar, and those are to help them understand the reflective coaching model that we'll talk a little more about later. Professional development plans should be inclusive of any contracted program staff, so that if you're working with Head Start or any private providers, they should be invited to attend professional development so that your district can work closely to make sure they're getting the same information that your district staff are getting. I'm going to pass it over to Alexis now to talk about inclusion.
Wonderful. Thanks, Beth. We actually do have a question, Kate. I go ahead.
Perfect. I think we'll go ahead and cover it in the next section, but maybe you can start out with it. Can the master teacher and the PIRS person be the same?
The answer is yes. The master teacher and the PIRS coach can be the same person, and it's actually our next slide. So I'll talk a little bit more about that on the next one. So first, let's talk about the inclusion of children with disabilities. So as Beth mentioned, the expectations are that children with disabilities are included in all gen ed classes. They should be included at the rate of what we refer to as naturally occurring proportions. So you probably saw that language referenced, I think it might have been in the NFO. What that means is there should be anywhere from 1 to 3 students per class out of that 15 that would be students who are identified as a student with a disability. You will also see that there is a hard cap at 5 students. The reason being is that, the more students we include in the classroom as students with disabilities, the more challenging the classroom may become. So we like to limit it to mirror what would be occurring in, the natural population of students, which is typically, or give or take 20%, which would be that 1 to 3 students per 15. So that's really what we're shooting for. What also can happen is, if you have students transfer in from early intervention, they turn 3 in the middle of the year, and then they get put in gen ed classes, then that's going to up your count of students with disabilities. So we have to make sure that we're planning accordingly. So thinking about, saving a spot in some of those gen ed classes, if you're a district that maybe gets a lot of referrals from early intervention, is certainly a strategy that a lot of districts use to make sure that there's still opportunities for general education for our students with disabilities. Next, how we like to support, or one of the ways we like to support the students in the classroom is through the use of integrated therapies. So integrated therapy are when our related services providers, so our occupational therapists, physical therapists, speech therapists, behaviorist, whoever else you might have, works within the classroom throughout the natural routines of that child's day. So instead of taking a child out to a separate classroom to engage in an occupational therapy session, the OT would actually come in the classroom and support the child in the classroom, during center time. Maybe the occupational therapist would be working with the child, pretending to do dress up in dramatic play or what have you. So there's a lot of different ways that this can look. But really just looking at following the natural routines of the child's day and the therapist being a part of that team to support the child in the classroom. We know that that benefits not just the child, but also the teacher as well, because the teacher is then able to learn from the therapist while they're in the classrooms and acquire some of those skills to support the students for the times that the therapists are not in the classroom. So additional supports for teachers who are in these gen ed classes could be through the role of the master teacher or the PIRT, which again, we'll talk about in a minute. Also could be from special education. So some districts have assigned, teachers to be like a consult teacher, a special education consult, where they travel to multiple classrooms and they work to support the teacher, to support the students with disabilities in that classroom. So there's a lot of different ways, but the expectations are that there are strategies and systems in place that will help the children with disabilities be successful in those classrooms. Lastly, it's expected that the classroom teacher has input into the IEP process. So one of the ways that we do this is through the use of the review of the preschool day. So the review of the preschool day is a form that was created by the DOE a couple years ago, or more than a couple, like 7 years ago. It is in our special education code, and it breaks down the routines of the day in relation to the specific state-funded curriculums. So it says, this is arrival time, this is what happens in creative curriculum during arrival time, and then here's the right-hand side that gives you an opportunity to talk about accommodations, modifications, and specific supports for that child during that time of the day. So what we would like to see is for, what the DOE would like to see is for the teacher to be involved in creating the strategies and being at the table for those discussions as far as how it looks to support these children during the routines of the day in the classroom. So I will pause there and see if there's any questions. No questions? Okay.
I did put the URL for the review of the preschool day template in the chat feature though.
Perfect, thank you. So next is our coaching roles. So I'm going to start by talking about the master teacher and the PIRS first, and then I will talk about the PIRT team. I'm feeling like in looking at this slide, Beth, I could have had like a nice little chart to separate the three or something. I don't know. This is the confusing slide. So when we talk about our master teacher and our PIRS, which is the preschool intervention and referral specialist, those two roles are coaching roles. So what that means is they are visiting the classrooms regularly, they're conducting observations, they're engaging the teacher in reflective practice. They do this through the use of a reflective cycle. Doing observations, goal planning with the teacher, and then, kind of debriefing and then going back to the drawing board, implementing other strategies and so on. So those two roles are both coaching roles. The difference is that the master teacher coaches on the curriculum, performance-based assessments, and any other classroom assessments. So as Beth was mentioning earlier, maybe it's creative curriculum or high scope or tools of the mind, whatever the curriculum may be, that's what the master teacher is coaching the teacher on, the implementation of the curriculum. And then also any performance-based assessments that are tied to that. So teaching strategies, goal, or advantage, whatever your assessment system is, as long as it's a performance-based assessment, is what the master teacher would be supporting the teacher in utilizing. The last part of the classroom assessments, that could be something like the ECHRS that I believe was also mentioned earlier. So that's the environmental rating scale that's used to measure high quality in early childhood classrooms. So that also could be part of what the master teacher is working with that teacher on. Now the PIRS, again, the preschool intervention and referral specialist, who is also a coach, is coaching on practices specific to the pyramid model. So the pyramid model is a tiered intervention model for social emotional development for children, provides a wealth of strategies from universal strategies to support children in the classroom, targeted all the way up to kind of intensive supports. So the role of the PIRS is to know the pyramid model and then be able to support the teacher in implementing the pyramid model practices in the classroom. Through this, they are also using the teaching pyramid observation tool. So that is referred to commonly as the teapot. So like the master teacher has the ECHRS and some of the performance-based assessments, the PIRS has the teapot to help kind of focus observations as well. In addition to coaching in the classroom, both of these roles are also expected to provide professional development. So again, with the understanding that master teacher is focusing on curriculum, the PIRS is focusing on pyramid model, but they are expected to provide professional development to the teachers. This could be through PD trainings during, in-service days across the district. It could also be through the lens of PLCs. There's a lot of different ways that this could be implemented. Lastly, they need to collaborate with one another. So what we are finding, and I know the question earlier asked about the master teacher and the PIRS being the same person. So the answer obviously to that I said was yes. And then obviously you're not going to have the collaboration that you might hear because you would be the same person, but that's okay. That does happen in some of our districts. But if you are in fact in a larger district that could support a position for both, these roles really work in tandem. They should be, communicating on a daily basis and working together, just again, coaching teachers with a different lens. So now that I got through those two, I'm going to talk a little bit about PIRT. So what PIRT is the Preschool Intervention and Referral Team. So this is the team that essentially is established to support children and also support the preschool intervention and referral specialist. The PIRT team is comprised of, people that already exist in the district, the guidance counselor, social worker, maybe it's a speech therapist, whoever are roles that you feel and adhere to code as roles that can be on the PIRT team are there to support children when they need extra assistance. So the PIRS coach is coaching on all things pyramid model. And, the hope is that all teachers are implementing those practices then with fidelity and really building these high quality classrooms. However, we know that there's going to be children who need extra assistance. So the idea of this PIRT team and the structure for referrals, where the preschool intervention and referral specialist can go to the PIRT team, is to bring a child, to the team to say, okay, here's all things going on with Johnny, and we need to dig a little deeper into, what's happening during circle time and what's happening during center time, and do some problem solving and identify some strategies to put in place for Johnny. This is essentially, as the name obviously notes, it's an intervention and referral system similar to an INRS and K-12, but at the preschool level. So it's really meant to support the children in the gen ed classroom and be a support before perhaps getting referred to the child study team. I'm going to pause. How was that, Beth? Did I keep them all separated?
That was great. I think one of the biggest goals, it's, I was thinking for one thing, it's always Johnny that gets in trouble, isn't it?
I know, I'm sorry.
No, I would have said the same thing. But that part of the success of the preschool intervention referral team or specialist is to minimize referrals to the child study team. So we've heard of districts where, districts that had unusually inordinate numbers of children heading to child study team cut it by like 90% because they had implemented all the best pyramid supports in the classroom. So it really is truly a wondrous thing when it's working well. And I think that was a good point you made, that it's really, it should really be minimizing referrals to child study. Kate, were there any questions that came in?
We do have one question, whether or not two different districts can share one master teacher.
Yes, they definitely can. It definitely happens now. It can certainly be tricky to identify part-time master teachers. So if you're able to go in with a local district nearby and be able to build a full-time position out of one between the two of you, that's awesome.
Yes, and I would say, so one thing we didn't mention is that both the master teacher and the PIRS roles, DOE recommends a ratio of one master teacher for every 20 classrooms. And the same is true of the preschool intervention specialists. So yes, it works if you have 10 classes to hire one person to fill both positions. It also works to collaborate with local districts. It is also possible to hire a person as a consultant to do the work. If you have a very, very small program, you can also look to, if you're working with Head Start anyway, then they may have an ed coordinator that works as a coach at the Head Start. That could be your master teacher. I know with districts that I worked at when I was at DOE, a large district was able to send a master teacher and PIRT over to a much smaller district. Basically, one district hires the person and the other district pays their share of time spent at the district level. Any follow-up questions there, Kate?
Yeah, thank you.
I'll talk briefly about program evaluation. So we've laid it out this way just so you have some sense of what all should be included in there, but you wouldn't necessarily lay it out this way. But you want to be thinking of all levels of program evaluation, from child evaluation, which is done through the performance-based assessment that you would have already referenced earlier. You want to talk about the classroom or teacher level evaluation, which is what we didn't mention is that I guess Alexis did mention that the master teacher typically in New Jersey is required to use the Early Childhood Environment Rating Scale, 3rd edition, and they make those observations for the purposes of coaching and providing feedback to the teachers. They also use the PIRS uses the TPOT, the Teaching Pyramid Observation Tool, to make sure that pyramid model practices are fully integrated into the classes. So even though I have these the class mentioned here, I should have actually changed that because the class is not being used in New Jersey right now. You might also have a curriculum fidelity tools that you're using to make sure you're fully implementing the curriculum to fidelity. And I would say one caution here is that it's not permitted to use structured classroom observations to evaluate teachers. So it is okay in this section if you want to mention that teachers are evaluated. However, they are evaluated at the district level. If it's used Danielson or whatever system you use for teacher evaluation, you can mention that here too, but it's not permissible to use classroom observations by the master teacher or the PIRT to evaluate staff. And one little side note, I would say that just to keep in mind with preschool, that if you have people who are not used to preschool, such as principals, doing evaluations for teachers that you're hiring into preschool programs, they should really understand the curriculum so that their teachers are being assessed against appropriate measures. The main program evaluation that the Department of Ed wants you to use these days is Grow NJ Kids. Grow NJ Kids is the state's quality rating and improvement system. So you will see in the application that one requirement is for you to get involved in Grow NJ Kids. So in this section, you will write about how, if you're not already enrolled in Grow NJ Kids, that your plan will be in the spring to become enrolled in Grow NJ Kids, and then complete the self-assessment within the time frame that DOE states. I believe the application this year also includes a plan for getting rated within the year once you've started your preschool program. So whatever, essentially, and this is the trick for the entire application process, pretty much all of the answers that DOE is expecting are embedded either in the application, they're embedded in the preschool implementation guidelines or administrative code. They will, you can pretty much follow their documents as a source to find out what the expectation is for the high quality program components. And at the district level, they really want to know that you are aggregating data from all levels and utilizing that to inform program development and any changes to the program. So on this form, we also, it says SAVs as required. And this is side note, you should disregard that, I think, because the Department of Ed for many, many years with the former Abbott districts has been using the self-assessment validation system. And in the last few years, the DOE, instead of requiring all the newly funded districts to do the SAVs year to year, they are now requiring Grow NJ Kids in place of it. So you should, unless they, I don't believe it's mentioned this year in the application or the NFO. If SAVs is mentioned, then you would suggest that you will do the SAVs as the department requires it. But at this point, your primary program assessment will be Grow NJ Kids. And the last section worth 20 points is the budget workbook and narrative. So since we had a workbook webinar yesterday, we will not talk about the workbook itself, but really about what should be included in the narrative. And one of the things that I noticed, there is a discrepancy, as I said, between the NFO and the operational plan or application, is that the NFO has in this section that you should talk about your 5-year projection for serving your 90% of your universe. In the application, it's written in the outreach section. So my suggestion would be, although I didn't put it on this slide, that I would suggest you just embed that in this section as well, just to say this is your plan for outreach in the narrative. As I said, cross-referencing the two documents, which I know is confusing. You should detail specific expenses, startup and one-time costs, new hires, costs for contracting, any professional development costs should be noted here, costs for curriculum and curricular materials, and any family engagement activities planned should all be noted here. Essentially what you want to do here, and you would know this, you know, if you've worked on budgets before, you know, the budget workbook itself does not really give you space to delineate, you know, what you're hiring, you know, what this amount of money will buy you. And so in the narrative, you want to explain what that money's buying you. So this is, as I said, is worth 20 points. As we mentioned in the workbook webinar yesterday, the PEA funding is calculated from projected enrollment on your workbook based on county rates that are noted in the NFO. I will tell you that as of today, we are still waiting to get clarification from the Department of Ed about whether the funding will be for the half year or the full year, full rate, half rate. So as soon as we know that information for sure, obviously it will have to go into your calculations and we will let you know that. And I'm going to also give you the DOE's email address at the end so that if you don't hear the answer to that resolved within the next day or two, you should reach out to DOE directly to find out from them, because we're just trying to get clarification on the way the workbook is built right now. It projects the full per pupil amount. And we want to be sure that you know exactly what money you're getting for the year, since it's only the second half of the year. It's not a 10-month program this year, it's only a 5-month program. You will include total district funding for preschool children with disabilities. So a reminder that the preschool general education funds does not cover the cost of providing supports and therapies and additional aids or whatever you might need for children, preschool children with disabilities. So you would continue, you will represent on your budget workbook your share of preschool special ed funding, IDEA, or whatever funding you use to support your children with disabilities. I will tell you here and remind you again at the end that the budget workbook instructions that you got from DOE will really help guide your filling out this workbook and really helps to understand sort of which lines, which items are allocated to which budget lines. Kate, did we get any questions that we should address now?
The only questions, we'll just kind of reinforce this, that this PowerPoint, this recording, as well as the budget recording that was done earlier in the week, will all be sent out to everyone that's on this call. So you will have access to that as well.
Thank you. So resources to keep in mind, most of these are, some of these at least are mentioned in the document itself. refer back to the preschool program implementation guidelines. I believe there's a link in the operational plan to the guidelines and the administrative code, which guides all things preschool in New Jersey. You would have received from DOE when you got your budget workbook, you would have gotten budget workbook instructions. You should have received from our office ahead of the budget webinar yesterday, budget workbook tips in an email that I sent to you. That's something that our office developed. Any of these, if you need them, we can send them out to you. You would have also, you should have received a Q&A from the Department of Ed. It came out, I believe, last Friday. And that, I will say the caveat is that if you are not a superintendent or the person in charge of the program, the email might have gone would have gone to the contact person that DOE has as their primary person on their list. So you might not have received it directly. Then, we can send that to you too. We also developed in collaboration with DOE, the school district, some guidance on contracting for preschool services. So if you're looking at contracting with private providers or Head Start program, that's a document that you can reference where it will talk a little bit about the benefits, a little bit about the mechanics of how it works when the funding comes to you and you distribute to the providers. There are some FAQs related to contracting that we pulled off another DOE document that we had from last year, and various questions that have been asked and links to provider documents that may be helpful. So that's something that it was developed by our office. It would have come out of the Department of Education though, and certainly something we can send you. And then again, here's the growndjkids.gov address for other Grow NJ Kids resources. So we'll open it up to additional questions. I'll tell you that, as I said, I would give you the DOE early childhood email addresses here, as is mine. Kate, go ahead.
We do have a couple questions that came in, but I did want to reiterate, I know Beth has talked about it as well, that there are some differences between the NFO and the application. So as you're writing your application, we strongly recommend that you are looking at both documents to ensure that you're addressing all points on the NFO and the application. We also have a question about, we've got two questions in the chat right now. What if we have a program where some are paying tuition? Can we use this money for the class or only a new class? I think that's referring to if you've already got tuition.
Yes, if you already have tuition students and assuming that they are district students, you would be expected to refund any tuition that you've collected for the spring. And this money is intended to cover the cost of children who would otherwise being paid tuition. There is some of that information is in the DOE Q&A that they sent out about whether it's permissible to have tuition students. And the answer is essentially no, that once you take the funding for your district preschool students, unless you have every 3- and 4-year-old in a seat already, the expectation would be that you don't take any children from outside of the district unless all of your district eligible 3- and 4-year-olds are already served.
And I'll add the question number in for the DOE Q&A to the chat. And the other question is the money guaranteed for the 21-22 school year? How are we able to sustain this new program?
Well, that's also in the FAQ, I think, from DOE. They did talk about this. What has happened in the past is that once the funding is awarded to the district, in subsequent years, the money is embedded in the school funding. So it would come to you much the same way as your K-12 aid does. We have what has been happening in recent years. We can tell you the funding has always been there. The funding has been available for districts, and the expectation has been that they would expand year to year and that the funding would grow as the program expands. What happens, let's say you wanted to open up 2 classes in February and you want to be a little cautious this spring for obvious reasons. Then you wanted to add 6 more classes next year. That was typically approved by the department, and subsequent years funding is based off your enrollment. So assuming you fill those 8 classes next fall and your ASSA shows the kids are being served, the funding would continue to come to you. I will say one thing I wanted to mention is that This is an especially complicated time of year to be doing the application because typically the DOE funding cycle is that districts, and I'll tell you that districts that are already funded, they already have preschool state aid, their projections for the 21-22 school year are to be submitted tomorrow on November 13th. And what happens is DOE reviews and approves those plans, and the budget figures go to the budget office at Department of Ed, and then you get your final approvals in the March budget cycle. So I'm going to tell you that my suggestion would be that as you're planning for the spring, you additionally plan for and project for the fall, because what is likely to happen is that if you get awarded funding on December 18th, I expect it will be likely that the department will come back to you very soon thereafter, within the next couple of weeks, to ask you what your plan is for the fall 2021. So I would say as you develop this plan, and because you would be also spelling it out at least to a certain extent what your plan is for the coming years, you should have in mind what you plan to do that may be the same or different than it is in the spring of 2021. Are there other questions, Kate? Is there anybody that would like to unmute themselves and ask a question?
Beth, before we go to questions, do you want to talk a little bit about getting applications to us and our timeline for reviewing?
Actually, I can. Yeah, I was going to wait, but I will. Thank you for that. Yeah. So we have said for assistance, you can contact us. We are happy to help you. I will tell you that if you would like us to do a review of your draft application, we will do that as capacity allows. So I will say that we will help districts on a first come, first served basis. And my suggestion would be that since given that we have Thanksgiving in the middle of all of this, and we would like to try to take the day off, that we would ask you to get your application, your draft applications to us, or draft workbooks, or call us with questions. The sooner the better. I'd say draft applications would be great if you can get them to us by, let's say, Wednesday the 18th, so that we have a few days to get back to you before we get close to the Thanksgiving holiday. And certainly you can reach out with one-off questions. You can email me to set up a time to talk to one of us and run some things by us. Whatever we can help with, we will be happy to help you, but we will only be able to do so as we have the capacity, the staffing capacity to do that, and time permits. We'll tell you, experience has shown us in recent years that we will get budget workbooks submitted to us the day before applications are due, and people want to know if it's okay. Look, can you look at my budget workbook and tell me if this is okay? We will not be able to do that at the last minute. It just doesn't work. For us to really give it a good review, if you send us your stuff, we will give it a thorough review, and we will do our best to either meet with you or give you written feedback, but we can't do it at the last minute, and especially not because the applications are due on a Monday. So, so just, keeping all that in mind, I know it's a really unimaginably stressful time for all of you, and the, time is limited to get the application prepared, but whatever you can do to get it prepared in the next week will be really great, because then we can give you, maximum support. Was there anybody that wanted to ask any questions before we finish up? Well, hearing no more questions, I would say we won't keep you any long. Anybody have anything else, any staff, or have anything you wanted to add? I will say that I will stop sharing my screen. Kate and I will at least hang around for a few minutes if anybody does want to stay on and ask a question, or thinks of anything at the last minute. Otherwise, reach out to us by email. Best wishes and be well to everybody. And thanks so much for joining us.